I am going to stop sharing and turn it over for our presentation on Equidox.
Fantastic, thank you. All right. Let's get the sharing down first. If someone can just confirm you can see my screen, you never know how it plays out.
Yes, we do.
Fantastic. Well, welcome everyone. Today, I'm going to be talking about Equidox, and we're going to look at some finer details of what makes a PDF file accessible and kind of what that means. So first off, I got to go into my favorite slide. My name is Sean Jordison. I'm an alternate media and assistive technology specialist at the Accessibility Center. I have a master's degree in assistive technology and human services and have been working in accessibility for most of my career, almost like 12 years now in accessibility. I can't hardly believe it. The time has gone by so fast, and I, in a lot of ways, feel like I'm still beginning. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, here is the agenda. This is my goal anyways. There's quite a bit to cover here. The first thing we're going to look at is what is Equidox, features of Equidox. We're going to be looking at dynamic zoning, alternate text editing, the Equidox preview window, and document sharing. Also, we were going to look at file exporting, and then I'm going to do a demo where I'm sure things will work perfectly and there will be no errors as I try to show you all what Equidox can do. So before we do all of that, we're going to talk a little bit about what makes a PDF document accessible. In some ways, this training today is a little advanced in the sense that I think there should be a basic understanding of what makes a PDF accessible. And that's what we're going to cover now. So when we say what makes a PDF accessible, what does that actually mean? Well, all of these bullet points will get you to about Section 508 compliance. There are some additional laws out there that you could make your documents even better. But for us, we are required to do 508. So let's talk about these. Basically, your file needs all of these elements. We need to have a descriptive file name. The metadata for the file must be set, which includes the title, subject, keywords. The reading order must be set via the tags panel. All lists should be formatted properly. All your tags should be properly formatted. There are specific semantics to make one tag be communicated to assistive technology over another. For example, a lowercase h in the tags panel will not be recognized as anything, as Acrobat wants a capital H in the H1 type of world. All of the links need to be descriptive. That means avoid things like click here and more info. Every table in the file should have header rows and columns with data linking. Alternate text needs to be applied for images, charts, and graphs. We also need to look at color contrast, the appropriate use of headings throughout the entire document. And then finally, I like to make sure it also passes the Adobe Acrobat checker. Now, it should be known that the Adobe Acrobat checker does not guarantee any level of compliance. It is what Adobe has sort of said, hey, we think this is accessible. But just because it passes the checker does not mean it's accessible. However, after you apply all the other bullets, it's a decent indicator to verify your work. So I like a little bit of engagement. For those of you that are here with me, someone's had to work with PDFs, right? I've been in and out of today's session all day, so I know I've seen a lot of PDF talk, but now's your chance. Air your grievances. What is your pain? What have been some of your frustrations with making PDFs accessible or working with them in general? In the chat, I'd love to get some responses. Monique said tables. The tables. charts, tags in general. Word to PDF conversion is clunky. You are correct, my friend. Kara said when tags are like 5 pages away. By the way, there's a trick for that. Unfortunately, today we're not doing Adobe Acrobat. So we're kind of taking a parallel lane to accessibility. There's some crossover, but not a lot. The read aloud feature. Yeah, I hate the read aloud feature. That's what I'm saying. Adobe Acrobat, like they have these accessibility features, but man, they don't really work as intended. My analogy is they built this 100-story building and then thought like, oh, well, we'll just put in the elevator now. And that's why like things don't work very well. Forms, oh mama, don't even get me started on forms. Awesome. OCR issues, yeah, you guys are saying what I know. Tags not properly migrating from Word, InDesign, Google Docs. Yeah, that is an art in itself, exporting. Nested material like nested lists or nested tables, yuck. I find that as long as I create a Word doc that is accessible and save as PDF, chances are better. That is correct. That is a fantastic starting point. Forms, awesome. Not having Sean available to do it for us. Hey, Lisa, I like that. The entire document is a scanned textbook page. Bingo, I was waiting for it. Oh, someone did say OCR earlier. Character encoding. Yes, awesome, Sylvia. That's actually a really advanced technique. So kudos to you for knowing about that. So that's a good segue. I'm gonna take Kara's comment. Not that all of yours weren't completely relevant, but Equidox is a tool that can hopefully relieve some of this pressure, okay? Now it's important to note, this is not Adobe Acrobat, okay? This is, for all intents and purposes, a replacement to Adobe Acrobat. Now you still are gonna need Adobe Acrobat to kind of verify the content, but this is like a separate lane on the freeway. This is the commuter lane, wherever they call that. So the reason I want to take Kara's comment about the scanned textbook page, that is really what Equidox excels at, is image-based documents. They have a fantastic OCR engine on the back end that does a really good job. And more than that, it's kind of what you want Acrobat to be. So let's say there is poor OCR on a scanned textbook page, right? Most of us have seen that, and it obviously is not reading correctly. Within Equidox, you have the ability to change any part of the content on the back end. So visually, your document will look identical, but on the backside, it will have the right text. So let's get into this a little bit. I appreciate you all sharing. Thank you very much for that. So let's jump into what is Equidox. Well, it's a web-based application intended to facilitate the remediation of inaccessible PDF documents into HTML files. We can create mostly accessible EPUB files or accessible PDFs from our documents. And good news for those of you who are in the CCCs, we have a limited number of licenses available. And if you would like to gain access to Equidox, please contact this email address, accessibility@ccctechcenter.org. You can request an account through there. Many of your colleges probably have an account, but we can kind of figure that out as we go. So what about some features of Equidox? I've kind of jumped around my presentation, but here's some things you can do. You can quickly zone documents. They have a built-in slider that allows you to choose what parts you want zoned. You also can literally click and drag your mouse, similar to the reading order feature within Acrobat. You can quickly edit alternate text document-wide. So if you had a 100-page document, you could add alt text to the images on one screen. The last presentation had sort of talked about a lot of alt text techniques, and I really appreciated it. And Acrobat is very challenging. You have to go in one at a time unless all of the images have nothing. Within Equidox, there is a special screen we can look at, and it just has every image in the document and the alt text right there. And I'm going to show you this in just a little while. There is an easy table editor. Tables, everyone said tables in the chat. Equidox makes it super simple to simply drag a box around a table, hit OCR, and you can easily adjust the columns and the rows for your headers. Equidox has added some support for forms. However, we do not suggest that you use Equidox at this time for forms. They came out with a feature, it probably was 6 months ago, maybe a year now, time flies. They did have some capability, but it required both Equidox and Acrobat. So if you are going to be creating forms, we still recommend using Adobe Acrobat. I recommend using Adobe Lifecycle Designer, but that's another conversation. One thing that's really nice about Equidox is the ability to preview your file using HTML formats. So they have a nice built-in button that we can quickly see all of the content on our page that's been recognized. Additionally, you can export to a few different file types, and those include HTML, EPUB, and PDF. And if you are working with a team, I'm thinking about my alt media specialists who are here, or I guess anyone really. Essentially, you can set up sort of a master account and you could have multiple people working on chunks of content. So if you needed to convert a textbook, say, you scanned it in and you need an accessible PDF, you can assign like 20 pages to each person in your area and kind of work on it at the same time. So that's one big benefit of Equidox. And finally, it's web-based. So most of the time that's a good thing, but if your internet goes down at the college or wherever you are, that will pose a problem. And then finally, we can provide it for free to the CCCs at a limited license ability. Maureen said this is really for remediation, right? Not for creating new PDFs. That is correct. This is not a PDF creation tool. This is an accessibility tool 100%. All right. So my intent is to share these slides at a later time. So I kind of go heavy on my screenshots, but I think that they're beneficial. Of course, I'm biased because I created them. So let's just kind of jump into it, okay? I'm going to give you some lay of the land first before our demo, and then we'll jump into it. So areas on the page must be designated as certain types of structures. And this is where Equidox dynamic zoning is super awesome. Zoning can include marking heading structures, links, tables, lists, figures, text, and a whole bunch of other recognized tags. And the image on this slide shows the Equidox zone properties. The left side of the image shows the different types of zones that can be picked, and the right side of the image shows the text on the page with each individual line zoned. So if I were to export this right now, this screenshot that you're looking at, all of those elements would come through as individual paragraph tags, which we don't want to do. Let's keep going. So zones can be determined in a couple of different ways. They can be determined from the tag structure of the PDF, and you can use what's called the zone detector slider in an attempt to choose the appropriate zones. On this slide, I have a GIF which shows how to use the zone slider in Equidox. The slider will zone the page in greater or lesser detail depending on the sensitivity that I choose. This is useful for tagging content as large sections or as individual lines. So when we look at a zone source, let me go back to the previous slide. If we were to take the top level paragraph that begins with disproportionately in child welfare, and we go to this slide here, we can actually choose how we want to get the text or do the OCR. So an individual text zone can be OCR'd. You can provide what's called actual text, which is a specific setting within Adobe Acrobat. You can choose to take the text from the PDF, or you can use custom text. Now, it's just so much power there. This is best used for when the recognition of the text is kind of awful and when there are acronyms. Some screen readers will read some acronyms not correctly. And I personally probably go above and beyond what is technically required, but I try to create the most accessible documents I can, just because I feel like I should champion this message. So for me, I often will use custom text for all of my acronyms. It's simple enough to have a notepad open of the acronym and you just copy and paste it in. Now, what's nice about this is updating the zone source will not actually change the document. So visually, everything is exactly the same. If we were to choose custom and I fall asleep on my keyboard and I'm just hitting like Z and X or something for 100 characters, that's what's going to be read aloud, even though the document looks perfect. So don't fall asleep on your keyboard and instead write actual text from the document and you should be fine. Now, this is especially useful with scanned documents. The infamous, when you scan a textbook, where the page isn't folded down enough and you kind of get like an arc of letters. This is a fantastic tool to switch that zone source to custom and then type what the line actually was, and it will be read perfectly by a screen reader. I shouldn't say perfectly, but probably pretty good. Now, on the screenshot on this slide shows the Equidox zone source, and the options include PDF, actual text, OCR, or custom. So we're going to do just a quick Equidox zone summary. Zoning is tagging, but in Equidox, they call it zones. So I'm trying to use the right language here, but if you're like, what is a zone? It's what tagging basically means. So zoning is quick and fast in Equidox and often a lot more accurate than Adobe Acrobat. All these words are too similar. Often more accurate than Adobe Acrobat. Update zone text quickly without having to change screens. This is super handy for working with complex documents where you need a lot of fixes. Instead of rekeying the whole document, Equidox is going to give you a lot of support with the OCR side. And you're going to have a lot more control over what's tagged or not tagged in the exported PDF. And then finally, I think I skipped over this in the last slide. You can change languages for individual zones. So that is a 508 requirement. If you are working with files that have more than one language, the languages need to be individually set on those tags. All right, we have a comment. Nathaniel Rice, good to virtually see you. This is good for custom readers that are scans of scans with underlining and highlighting that is basically impossible to OCR and even hard to read visually. Yep, totally. The theory with Equidox too is that Acrobat is kind of clunky, whereas Equidox can be learned and it just is a better experience. So if you had to pick between learning Equidox and Acrobat, you might choose Equidox because you're going to have a lot more power in what you create in Acrobat. But yeah, Nathaniel, you're totally right. All right, any questions? I'm going to be moving on to alt text in Equidox here. I'm assuming we're good, but I'm going to give you all a moment. Moving on. Okay, next up is alternate text. So again, that last presentation was super good about alt text. This is kind of like how to apply it. So, and in theory, you can refer back to this. It's pretty straightforward. Basically, you're going to select the figure zone indicated by number 1 in my screenshot. And then the area indicated by number 2 of my screenshot, on the left-hand side, we have a description field. And you're just going to type in your alt text there. And if you are exporting to HTML, HTML is like the only thing that currently supports what we call long description. You can add long description there. Don't overthink it. Let's just stick with alt text. And it's very easy to add within Equidox. Now, this is probably my favorite feature of Equidox, and it's adding alternate text document wide. So basically, you can, in 2 clicks, edit all of the alternate text in a PDF. This is how you get there. You're going to select the document, and then you're going to select the images tab. And then this tab allows you, again, to not only add alternate text, but you can mass artifact images too. So if you have a bunch of things that like you're thinking this doesn't need alt text, this is definitely, you know, a decorative image, or maybe Equidox is picking up some random things on the page as an image, you could just mark them decorative, or artifacting is the term for that in Adobe Acrobat. You can do them in mass. So that's my favorite part. You know, a lot of people ask me questions about PDFs and 10 pagers. And for my alt media specialists, I wish I got 10 pagers. You know, full on 400-page textbooks. These type of features are really, really important to getting through material and getting students their materials as quickly as possible. All right, next up, we're going to take a look at the Equidox table editor. So the table editor appears almost like an overlay where lines can be added to separate individual cells. You can use a slider to automatically add lines to rows and columns. And you can change the text of any cell in the table editor and add a table summary, all on the same screen. So you all mentioned tables, and I think sometimes I may skip over some of the basics, so I'm going to give them to you now. If you are having trouble with tables, the first thing I would ask you to do is look at the structure and avoid using merge cells wherever possible. And really try to keep your table simple. All tables should be used to display and contrast data. Please do not use tables to move content to the left or to the right of your page. There are much better ways to do that. So the image on my slide, on this particular slide, highlights the use of the table editor in Equidox. There's a table detector slider, which you can use to adjust the number of columns and rows on any given table. All right, so reading order, Equidox versus Acrobat. So do I give it away? I do give it away. So I learned this somewhat recently. Almost all assistive technology will read a document based on the order of the tags panel. There's one exception, and that is read and write. If you don't know what read and write is, that's okay. For those of you who do know, read and write is going to read based off of the Z order panel. And within Acrobat, the reading order depends on the tag structure. So whatever you know about the reading order, try to make it to where the tags are in that order for the read order. Anything else you've heard, we can debate it offline if you would like, but 95% of the time, the most accessible method is to put the tags in the correct order. And the point of this is the Equidox reading order can be updated really quickly in the zone editor. So it's pretty straightforward. Equidox can change the reading order with a drop-down box, or you can update any individual zone. Has anyone tried to adjust the reading order in Adobe Acrobat and had a whole bunch of content disappear? Raise your hand. I have, and it is not fun. Yeah, Nate, see, you understand. I knew it would be like a fiery response because, man, nothing. And then try doing it on a 400-page document. I mean, it will literally make you go nuts. So one big thing that I love about Equidox is they have a little dial that you can you can type in the reading order. So you're like, I want this to be number 1 and this to be number 2, and that's it. And you can do that. So the reading order can be turned on and off, excuse me, the visual part. So it's really hard to see, but it's in the top right corner of each zone. So there are 2 images on my slide. The first image shows different options that a user can select for the reading order to include either the default option of top to bottom and the other options, which are 2, 3, and 4 columns. Now, this is sort of like an automated reading order that it applies, but you have full control over being able to change that. The second image is an example of the reading order displayed on individual zones within Equidox. Again, it's very hard to see, but the image on the right-hand side, the blue boxes, I was trying to point out the different reading order numbers there. They definitely fail color contrast, so yeah, keep that in mind. Here's another cool feature, the Equidox preview window. So you can preview any page in HTML to validate the reading order, the correct use of tags and zones, and it's also available for the table editor. So the preview button is small and it's at the top right corner of the Equidox application. This preview page will show all the content within that page of the PDF in HTML formatting. This is useful to make sure everything is working correctly. For example, if you have poor OCR, you're going to see what it looks like in that HTML preview. If you thought you tagged an image, but it's not showing up, it gives you the ability to sort of troubleshoot as you're working. Same with links. Did you do your link correctly? Did you do your lists correctly? And more importantly, did you use your tables correctly? You'll be able to clearly see if you made a mistake. Maureen asks, so we can use this tool to convert PDFs to the web. I would say that you can use this tool to convert PDFs to HTML. So yeah, you can get like plain text documents, but it's not going to create a page that you can go and then upload on your website. But essentially, yeah, you can convert your PDFs to text-based documents. All right, and then finally, we are actually able to validate progress. So Equidox allows users to mark if a page has been completed or not. Now, I personally don't care for this feature, but when I tell people this, they get very excited. So when you are working in a document in Equidox, let's say you went through all that hard work, you zoned it, you set the reading order, alt text is looking good, your tables are set, your links are accessible. It's beautiful. You hit that green checkbox and it will take you to the next page to work on. This is useful if you are working with a team. Again, you can assign certain people to certain pages, and sort of it's a tool to sort of validate your progress in any given document. Again, some people love it. I don't personally use it. It's up to you. All right, next up, basically this slide is to explain that you can share documents with others who have an account in your organization. This allows users to develop a workflow for passing documents to one another. And the image on this slide shows a sample of how to share a file with a group. Next up is exporting to HTML, EPUB, and PDF. Equidox allows for quick and easy export to an HTML file and an EPUB file once the file has been made accessible. On the Output tab is where you're going to choose your export type. And I'm going to be honest with you. I've talked a lot of good things about Equidox. I don't work for them or any of that stuff. There's some known bugs, okay? I've had a lot of people send me emails about like, this file is stuck. I requested it in PDF. It's just not coming. I don't know what to do. Here's what I'll say. There's known bugs. contact support, their support is stellar. There is built-in support. Typically, you'll provide like the URL because this is a web-based product and the name of the file, and they should be able to help you out. Next up is our demo. All right, I need just one moment to get my stuff up. If anyone has anything they'd like to add in here or chat about, please feel free. Okay. So without fail, every time I do this presentation, there's an issue. So let's see if today we could do no issues. All right, so I'm actually already signed into Equidox. I hope you can see my screen okay when I am.
Yes, we see your Equidox.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you. So I'm signed into my account. Now I have like a mega master account. So my settings are going to be a little different than what you see, but we're going to walk through the gist of things. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to throw in a new file for us to look at. So I am on the import document button. That is this button on the left-hand panel. When you first sign in, it will take you immediately to where all of your documents are. Because of my account, I actually see every single person's document. So we're going to stick to the import here. And I have a file in here that I want to do. So let's take this OCR image example. And I'm going to upload it. Now, once you upload, we have to select import. One cool trick, you can actually upload by URLs. So if you're working in IT or accountable for what documents go onto your website, a URL is sometimes a good way. You can just paste them all in there and it will upload them for you, as opposed to having to download them all and go the other way. All right, hopefully this won't take too long. By the way, I had to change my presentation monitor, so I'm not actively reviewing the chat. If someone has a question, please feel free to unmute yourself, or if someone from our team would pleasantly read them aloud for me, I would greatly appreciate it. All right, so no content on page 1. Dun, 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 dun. Does anyone want to guess what this file is about? It's unfair because I name things too specific. It's that alt media brain, OCR image example 01. So we're going to click open. And this is basically the main window within Equidox. We have all of the pages in my document near the top of the screen. And then I have a whole bunch of fun settings for this individual document underneath it. So earlier when I had mentioned like the images tab, this is where they all are. The output tab, it will take you a couple of tries to get a little comfortable with the layout of this tool. When I first started using it, I could never remember how to get to this section of Equidox because you'll see there's a lot of options. So we're going to jump into this one-page document and begin zoning it. To open it, I'm simply going to select it one time with my mouse, and it opens this file. Now, the first thing that I see is kind of a bunch of overlays, and the text is a little blurry. If it appears blurry to you, that's because it is a scanned image. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to begin making this document accessible because I don't have a presentation on this particular part. So if you want me to go somewhere else, let me know. But otherwise, I'm going to walk through this as if I was remediating it on my own. Now, the first thing that I want to do, I want to play with this zone detector. So I can grab this little detector and slide it around, and it is zoning different parts of the content. And let's see, I kind of like this one. This is way up here. The reason I like this level is because it has all of this content in a single zone and all these list items. And then there's also something funny about this. Because this is a scanned image, sometimes there's a little wonkiness when doing a scanned image. And basically, Equidox is marking the entire page as an image. So we have all these nice zones, and then it's just slapping an image zone over the top. I'm going to click it one time with my mouse and just hit delete because I don't want that thing there. If there is a zone on this page, it will be exported out. So let's dive into this a little bit. Now, the first thing that I notice here is this whole text is in one chunk. Now, I could have used the slider to maybe adjust it a little bit, but if I do that, it resets everything. So I'm going to go ahead and reset it. I'm going to take this back down to 11, and then I'm going to delete that image zone again. So the point of me showing you that is just be careful using the zone slider because it's really easy to undo all of your work. I've done that many times. All right, let's click on this first header up here. We have join the vision for success. Now there's lots of zone properties in here, but it is most important to pay attention to just a couple of things. So the name isn't really going to matter. This doesn't have any effect on assistive technology right now. The type, this is what matters. So this is going to be a heading. And then because I chose heading, I actually get some sub properties. And I'm going to change this little icon to level 1. And I'm so sorry if this is very small. I cannot seem to zoom in on my Equidox options. I can zoom in the page, but not the options. So under heading properties, I am changing the level to 1. And in the top of the zone, I can see I have an H1 telling me that we have a header 1. So let's keep going. This next zone on the page appears to be a text zone. I agree, it looks like text. Let's keep going. The next zone appears to be text. Looks good to me. And then we start getting into more text and some list items. So let's change this up a little bit. I'm going to move my zones so that I can tag this list. So lists are an advanced feature, and I probably shouldn't show you this, but I get excited and I'm going to show you anyways. All right, so I'm going to drag a box around all of the list items. It's currently set to a text field. I'm going to change that type to a list. And it puts this green little bar on the side. I'm going to drag that content over because that is intended to grab my labels for my list. Now, when I choose list, I get a whole bunch of options. I can choose unordered or ordered, or I can even have a list detector here, which because this is a scanned image, I've noticed this is actually pretty terrible. But here I have the ability to edit how many list items there are. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'm going to change this number to 5. And then we're going to drag the little lines to the correct spots of the list item. Now, if this feels complex, it's because scanned images are pretty hard. If you're working with any document outside of a scanned image, the automated zoning is going to be a lot more precise and accurate, but I wanted to show you guys like the hard stuff. From here, let's keep going first. We're just applying all of our zones, making sure everything is in here. We have some text, and then we have some more text and some content on the bottom. Just for sake of time, I'm actually going to delete this footer content out my fellow alt media specialists and I, a lot of times best practice is to remove headers and footers because they can disrupt the flow of content. So that's my reasoning for deleting them now. With that said, I'm going to go back to my page properties. And because this is a scanned image, I'm going to select OCR all zones. But I had to do all of that heavy lifting with the zoning first before I wanted to do the OCR. Sometimes it takes a little while. Are there any questions in the chat?
Yes, we have two questions. One is, can HTML file be iframed into Canvas page?
Probably, but my follow-up would be why. So if you are exporting out to an HTML page, you can just copy the content and paste it into Canvas. Anytime we can keep the accessibility within one spot, that's a better thing to do. Of course, this isn't a presentation on accessible Canvas pages, but a common message that we are trying to teach faculty in our system, make the Canvas page accessible. It's way simpler. But you can still use this tool as an OCR tool to get your content. So once you get your content, I wouldn't put it in an iframe. I think that's an unnecessary extra step. Just copy and paste it into Canvas and then make your Canvas page accessible. That's what I would do.
And then the second question is related to what you're looking at now. What do the numbers represent?
Good question. Reading order. And so I actually was going to show that next while we did the zoning. So the reading order is this little number in the top right corner. And what I'm going to do now, I'm going to preview this window, this page in the HTML format. And what we're looking at here is the order. So we have the words, join the vision for success, right? Let's say this was out of order. What if join the vision for success was actually somewhere else? We're going to change it. I'm going to make that order 5, just for fun. And it put it right here. It put it down a few lines. Now you might be thinking, where's number 4 or 3? The reading order tool isn't perfect. You can just delete numbers if you want. Like if you marked something reading order 1 and reading order 10, it's going to appear in the right order if there's only 2 elements on the page. You don't need to necessarily, it's more important that the content is in the right order, not so much a number scale of like 1, 2, 3. I hope that makes sense. Let's see. So earlier we had, let's move this back to a 1 reading order. How am I doing on time? Getting close. All right. Let's move it back to a 1. And then basically what I was going to point out is this box right here, the CCC system, it's disrupting the flow. So if I look at my preview window, this right here was that content. And I don't like disrupting the flow of my main body of text. It's that alt media brain. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to move it to the end of the document. Now, earlier when I had mentioned like the order doesn't really matter, what I mean by that is if I know this is going to be last, I could just type in like 100 on the order and then preview. And all it does is it puts it as the last item. So sometimes it's like a trick to like, you don't have to count them or like, did I mark 12 or 13? Just make it 100 if you know it's the last item and it will save you some time. All right, let's take one step back because I'm running out of time. Let's validate the page. So good job, team. We did it. Don, I'm sending this document to you shortly. Let me just validate it first. We're going to save that document. And then let's see if I can get back to my main screen without destroying everything. All right, here it is. So it's kind of clunky to get back to the main properties, but I want to run through this real quick. So the first thing I'm going to do is change my the title of the document. I'm going to put it something more relevant. All right, and then what I'm going to do let me see. Okay, yeah, so I'm changing the title of the document to Sean is awesome. And then I'm just gonna walk through these properties and just make sure everything looks good. I'm gonna check my metadata. I'm not even gonna touch the metadata. I like to do that in Adobe Acrobat. And then we're gonna check our images. So I have one image that it just keeps coming through, and it's because it's a scanned document. So right now, the only image that's recognized in this document is the whole page itself, and it's already set to hide zone. Now, if I wanted to, I could change it to visible, and that would force me to add alternate text to it. But for sake of time here, we're just going to leave it as hide zone. Let's look at our history. We can see when it was imported. This might be actually one I did earlier. And then you can check the permissions on the file. And then finally, outputs. So I'm going to keep this as PDF for sake of time. And we're going to say Sean is awesome. And there's one trick here. You have to put .pdf. I don't know why they do this, but you have to put the .pdf extension. At least in my testing, you have to. From there, there's a box on the right-hand side of the screen to generate PDF. And it is currently creating that PDF. Let's go ahead and download this file really quick. Sorry, just a moment. Let's see, where did I put that file? And bringing it back. All right, and what we're gonna do is take a peek at the tags panel and look at this beautiful tags panel. Again, this is not PDF accessibility training, but for those of you who work with tags, we have a section tag, which is a visual structure, and it looks kind of funny sometimes, right? Like it looks like success is cut off. This, oh, it looks like there's more cut off. Let's see what actually happens here. I'm gonna expand my window so all the words are there. Join the vision. We can walk through this content. And it looks like there's a little bit of buggy here. You know what? In hindsight, I didn't see that list element in my preview window. I think that's because this content was not OCR'd properly. So what I just did, I went back into my document, clicked on my list zone, and I changed my source to OCR and then select OCR. And then let's preview our window once more. And they're here now. That's good. That explains the issue with the export. But if you notice, we have some gobbledygook at the top of these that we would need to fix individually within Equidox. And unfortunately, I'm out of time. I know I get carried away, but thank you all for being here. And I'd love to address some of the questions in my remaining 2 minutes. All right. Let's see. I saw my Oxnard College PDF among your lists. Nate, that was something I have like the most master account you can possibly have. So I see everybody's stuff. In fact, it's kind of frustrating because I can't ever find my files because we have a lot of people using Equidox. So that's good. You should only have access to your organization's files. And if you're an administrator, you should be able to see all of them under your campus account. Sasa said, I noticed that when marking reading order, creating zones, if your selection is a bit wider, it adds a blank space in the HTML preview. Does this mean we have to be very precise? I don't know that that was actually happening. It's possible, but my understanding is it doesn't grab white space like that. This could be a unique situation of it being a scanned image. They just create a whole bunch of nonsense. So maybe that's what we were seeing. Thank you, Nathaniel. Thank you everyone for being here today. Don, you're up.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for attending this presentation. As a reminder, we will be sending out tomorrow a survey